Hello everyone, this is MC Deck Discussions and I'm Abby Small, and today we have another deck discussion with Star-Lord in Leadership called Going Out in a Blaze of Glory. And this deck was modified significantly through the playtesting. I actually was trying to build a deck to utilize a card to meet Winning Hands challenge to play a specific card. And that card is Joining Forces. And as you can see, when you look at my deck refinements, I removed all 3 copies of Joining Forces because every combination I was trying to make work just wasn't working for me, at least with the level of villains that I was playing against. So why don't I mention that real quickly? So the villains tested against to refine the deck in both Standard and Expert were Claw, Black Widow, En-Sabah, which is a Apocalypse, the one that can change to 3 different versions, kind of like Ant-Man and Wasp do, and Magneto. And so what I found in my playtesting was I had started with a deck that I knew already could be effective and had added these Joining Forces cards to it, as long as some other strategic things that I thought would work. And I tried again and again and did some modifications, and I just really couldn't make the card work. So I hope some other people had better luck with Winning Hands Challenge and trying to create a solo deck. Although I don't think they're limited to solo, so probably people who play two-handed or play multiplayer found that they could use Joining Forces quite well. I couldn't. But hopefully, if anybody did figure out a way to make a solo deck that worked effectively, even against challenging villains that use Joining Forces, I'd be glad to see somebody's deck. So let me know if you happen to do that. But for me, I really couldn't make it work. So I ended up saying, well, as long as I'm playing with this deck anyway, I might as well make some modifications and see what I can come up with. So this is the final deck I came up with. And as you can see, we've got 13 allies, a variety of them. And let's note Star-Lord's ability here right off the bat, right? So he has 10 hit points, a hand size of 2, 2 thwart, 2 attack, 1 defense. And he has this great ability. Each ally you control gains the Guardian trait. In addition, he has this ability, which is an ability that can be both good or bad because of its temptation to use when you maybe shouldn't. And that is What Could Go Wrong. It's an interrupt. When you play a card from your hand, deal yourself 1 face down encounter card. Reduce the cost to play that card by 3. So I'll mention right up front that I found I lost games time and time again when I used that ability too early in the game, especially against those tougher villains and especially against an expert, right? And so my advice is try not to use that ability. Sometimes you don't have a choice. You get these emergency situations, but also sometimes those emergency situations aren't as much of an emergency as you really think they are. So just because you end up with a minion who stays out on the board or a side scheme that stays out on the board, evaluate whether that's really as high an emergency as it seems like, so that maybe you can take that out in the next turn with a little bit of patience and not panicking. I did find that it was so tempting to me time and time again. It was really near the end of my playtesting that I could finally just relax and allow myself to have a little bit of a dangerous situation out on the board, knowing that it wasn't necessarily going to defeat me, and have that patience not to use that ability and get those extra encounter cards out, especially when playing against En-Sabah and even more so against Magneto. I mean, Magneto will make you pay the price for having extra encounter cards out in play. And so I highly recommend, minimize your use of that. Try not to use it at all until you're ready to start making your final push, maybe your last 1 or 2 turns. But it's, and especially that very final turn. And you can do that if, you have plenty of allies to take care of that. And with Star-Lord's ability, which is this one here, the passive ability, each ally you control gains the Guardian trait. That keeps Knowhere in effect when you're on the hero side. For every single one of these allies that you play only if your identity has the Guardian trait. So that's on the hero side. Increase your ally limit by 1, but also you get this response, and this is what you really care about. After a player plays a Guardian ally, exhausts Knowhere, that player draws 1 card. So that ends up giving you that's kind of your resource generation in this deck. In addition to, we have plenty of cards that give us more card draw. So that would be Nick Fury, who can draw us 3 cards. That would be Maria Hill, who has this response after Maria Hill enters play. Each player draws a card. So in my case, solo player, so you get to draw a card from that. And then also White Tiger, response after you play White Tiger from your hand, draw X cards to a maximum of 3, where X is equal to the villain's stage number. If the villain has no stage number, draw 1 card. So not as effective against standard villains, at least in stage 1. But once you get to stage 2 or 3, White Tiger is an awesome card for playing from your hand, at least, right? So you do have to play from your hand to get that effect. But Nick Fury, of course, you can play from your discard pile or put into play from your discard pile, which is why we have a couple of copies of Make the Call to allow that to happen. Okay. All right, so you can take a look at the allies that I have in here. Most of them are not Guardians. That's actually important, though I put in the ones that I thought would be most effective in this deck, including Gamora, because she has this hero response. After Gamora attacks or thwarts, discard cards from the top of your deck until you discard an event, then add that card to your hand. So that can be really important for getting Blaze of Glory, Make the Call, or Noble Sacrifice out, or actually even something like Sliding Shot. So all of those are great cards. So let's look at those cards real quickly, because those are key to the final push in the game. Well, actually, Noble Sacrifice is a great card throughout the game. But let's look at Blaze of Glory. Hero action, each Guardian character gets +2 thwart and +2 attack this phase. At the end of the phase, deal 1 damage to each Guardian character. So great final push card, but also helps to deal with those emergencies to help you not have to utilize Star-Lord's ability, so you can kind of deal with those minions and side schemes. Now, this 1 damage at the end can be kind of painful, but if you do have the ability to do so, and we do have Professor X in here so that you can confuse the villain, then you can go to your alter ego side at the end of the turn, and that second part won't have an effect anymore. At the end of the phase, deal 1 damage to each Guardian character. So it won't have an effect anymore, at least on Star-Lord, because Star-Lord is not a Guardian on his alter ego side. And also, there are only a couple of Guardians in this deck. So none of those will take that extra damage at the end of the turn either. So so the only other card is Rocket Raccoon, who's really in here because first of all, he's a good thwarter, but also he gets that +3 attack against minions, which can be really effective in helping to get rid of those minions, and those attacks gain overkill, which is really nice. Okay. All right, so that's Blaze of Glory, 3 copies of that. We also have, like I mentioned, 2 copies of Make the Call, and then 2 copies of Noble Sacrifice. Great card in this deck. If Star-Lord is not at full health, then most of the time Noble Sacrifice will be the great play. It will be a good play to make when it's available, because what Noble Sacrifice does, it's a 1-cost card, a tactic, and it has this hero action: discard an ally you control, heal damage from a hero equal to that ally's printed hit points, and give your hero a tough status. So that ends up being really great because, you know, it's roughly equivalent to having one of your allies defend for you, but you get the addition of getting back some of that health that that Star-Lord has lost. In addition, it's more effective against an ally, En Sabanur. So Apocalypse, one of his forms, has overkill, and so having that, I just forgot what it's called. Having that tough status card can help prevent that. Of course, if you're going against villains that have piercing, then this may not be as effective. But against somebody like En Sabanur, then which is like I said, which is En Sabanur is actually the encounter deck, but Apocalypse, that version. So and you can change to that version that has overkill at any time when you're playing against him. So it can be real dangerous when you're doing so to take that risk. So Noble Sacrifice is really good, and I actually do have a recommendation, and it's written inside the deck description here, and that is when you're playing against Apocalypse and Magneto, which are the ones that have some really big attacks that can defeat you rather easily, then I would switch actually and have 2 copies of Blaze of Glory and 3 copies of Noble Sacrifice instead. So that's my recommendation there. Okay. And like I said, we have all of these other allies here. I didn't mention all of them, but you can read through and see who they are. I will mention a couple of ones that are very important, right? You've got Black Panther, who is able to get you back one of those blue leadership events when when Black Panther enters play. You also have there was somebody else I was thinking of, M, right, who can defeat a minion straight out if they have fewer hit points than M, and you can set that up pretty much any time to make that happen. And Goliath is a really nice one for actually, especially utilizing with Noble Sacrifice. So first of all, I like getting Goliath out initially a lot of times to thwart, but then when I'm ready to use his big attack, right, so he has only one attack with 2 consequential, but you can take this action. Goliath gets +4 attack until the end of the phase, and at the end of the phase, discard Goliath. So if you have that attack there with the extra 4, then he has 5. If you did happen to play Blaze of Glory, that brings him up to 7. And like I said, so he's already going to be discarded if you use that ability, right? So let's go back to him. So, at the end of the phase, discard Goliath. Well, so if you have Noble Sacrifice, since you're already going to discard him anyway, then you can get a bonus for discarding him as well. So that combination can work really nicely too. And especially with the card draw in this deck, you get some chances for those type of things to happen. Not all the time, but somewhat regularly. All right, so we also have call for backup here in order to, once again, get out whatever card you need. A lot of times that's going to be a Nick Fury, but here and there you'll find there's another card you might want to get out instead. And then superpower training is to help us to get out the extra element gun. So hopefully, usually you can get out the element gun in your first couple of turns. And then superpower training can help you get that other one out later. All right, because superpower training is the player side scheme that is each player may search their deck and discard power for an entity-specific upgrade and put it into play. And then call for backup is the one that once you defeat this player side scheme, each player may search their deck and discard power for an ally and put it into play. All right. So the only other card we added to this deck in the supports and upgrades is Knowhere, which we already talked about. Okay, so a couple of important elements of play here. So first of all, you can see my deck refinements that occurred once I got rid of joining forces. That's where I added in actually it's 2 copies of Make the Call. I guess I'll need to edit that. Added in Professor X so we could go down to Alter Ego here and there. And then both copies of Noble Sacrifice. Okay. And then this is that deck change recommendation that I said when you're playing against those more challenging villains who can really defeat you with those huge attacks. Okay. This is the advice of refraining from using Star-Lord's hero ability until you're ready to make those final pushes, or if it is a true emergency. But a lot of times you will pay the price for that, especially when you're facing the tougher villains. So make sure to measure whether or not the emergency really is as big of an emergency as you think it is. Okay? And then another piece of advice here is look for those victory conditions when you're close to the final villain stage, because this deck will do anywhere from 22 to 30 points of damage on the final turn once you get things set up, right? So if you have a copy of Sliding Shot in your hand, if you have a copy, maybe 1 or 2 copies of Blaze of Glory, right? If you're, so the time when you're ready to use his ability and really go for it, you get a bunch of card draw from Nick Fury maybe, or from White Tiger, or maybe you have 1 or 2 of these allies out already and you're going to get a third ally out, then you can do some huge damage. So you want to be able to take advantage of his turn when you have that ability. So pay attention to the cards that are in your hand and see if, hey, because with this deck, you should be able to be doing, especially with the element guns available, which do have piercing, by the way. It was to my detriment that that in many of my games, I forgot that it had piercing and could have made my life a lot easier by getting rid of those toughs on villains and minions. So make sure to remember that the element guns do have piercing. And so look for those abilities to go for that final attack, that big push, and use his ability. Once you start getting close to that third stage, you can, especially with this piercing, right? You can get through those tough stages, those toughs when those villains get to that third stage and really go for those big attacks. So a lot of times I found that not taking advantage of that, looking for that soon enough, is what could have cost me a game. Once again, but what really cost me the game most of the time is if I was using his ability, what could go wrong too early in the game. Try to get yourself going and set up, doing damage to the villain, and then start looking for those big attacks to finish them off. All right, so anything else? Yes. The point that using Noble Sacrifice is often better than using an ally to defend with, but most notably when Star-Lord has low hit points. But if you need to gain those hit points back, and then that advice again of going to Alter Ego after using Blaze of Glory. I found this to be a very fun deck, but not as much fun when I couldn't figure out how to play him. So those of you who are already great at playing Star-Lord, I'm sure you might have some more advice in the comment section. But I found that having that patience was the key to my victory, especially against those tougher villains, but even against the ones that weren't as tough. Although this whole set of villains can be pretty tough, especially an expert. Okay, so that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did, or if you do enjoy this kind of content. And again, I love reading people's comments and replying to them. Have a good one, everybody.